Welcome to the Everyday Conversion Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Sieverkrop, and I am just like you. I'm busy with work, family, kids, church, and a million other responsibilities. And honestly, some days I miss my personal scripture study and prayers. And some days we as a family miss our scripture study and prayer. But I'm trying. So if you're not perfect in living the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, but you're trying, we'll get along great, and this is the place for you. 5 days a week, I'll share a brief episode, often based on the Come Follow Me curriculum for that week that I'm using to have daily conversations with my kids, whether we're on our way to school or on our way home, or if it's real quick before dinner. And you're welcome to use them to do the same with your family or your personal study. Just know that the views and opinions I share are mine alone and do not represent the official doctrine and viewpoint of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now let's jump right in with today's episode. All right, welcome back to the Everyday Conversion Podcast. This is episode 41, and you can get the links to everything we talk about today at everydayconversion.com/BOM41. And I'm actually trying something brand new today. I'm actually recording this on my phone while I'm recording it into my podcast software, and going to share at least part of it on my Instagram story and my Facebook story. So if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you do that. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's also just everydayconversion.com/Instagram, or on the Facebook page, everyday.com/Facebook. And there's some really good stuff today. I say that just because it's fun to say now. But I read the Words of Mormon today. I didn't get a chance to finish it this last week. So I was reading through it this morning, and there was a couple things that really stuck out to me. One was in Words of Mormon, verse 4. I was reading and I realized that that really is the reason that Mormon, when he found the plates of Nephi, after he had abridged the entire Book of Mormon, he put together everything. He says that he even abridged everything from Lehi down to King Benjamin. But he says that he found these plates, and he said it contained this small account of the prophets from Jacob down to the reign of this King Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi. And then he says, and this is what I thought was interesting, because this is, to me, the reason that he included those plates intact as they were in their own words rather than abridging them. He says in verse 4, "And the things which are upon these plates pleasing me, because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ, and my fathers knowing that many of them have been fulfilled. Yea, and I also know that as many things as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass." And so he says, the reason that I included these plates in the Book of Mormon was because I saw that they had the prophecies of Christ. And if you go back and, I've mentioned before, I have this bookmark that I created that you can get at everydayconversion.com/bookmark that shares the 3 purposes of the Book of Mormon from the title page. And I've been blown away as I've read these first 143 pages at just how many times those 3 purposes of the Book of Mormon, why it was written, are included in those plates or in those records. The great things God has done for those before us, the covenants of the Lord, and the fact that Jesus is the Christ. And Mormon says here that the reason that he put it was because of the prophecies of Christ, and also because many of the things that had been prophesied concerning us, meaning the people of the Book of Mormon, had also been fulfilled. So he's looking at these prophecies and saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly what happened. I mean, he's a historian. He knows more about the history of the Lamanites and the Nephites and all of Lehi's descendants than probably anybody else up until that point, because he had taken all these records, he had read through all of them, he had compiled all of them, and then he had gone back and he'd found these plates that it described and has Nephi prophesying, Nephi and Jacob prophesying over and over again, not only that Christ will come, but what will happen to the people, to his people, to Nephi's people, to Mormon's people. And he says, oh my gosh, all of these things have came to pass. And so he's looking backwards and seeing that all of these things have been fulfilled. I mean, down until the fact that, where was it? My family and I were just reading where it talks about, I think it's 2 Nephi 26. Where it talks about the fact that, I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, in the beginning of 2 Nephi 26, where it's prophesying that, that the Lamanites and the Nephites will dwindle in unbelief, that there will be, up until, what was it, 27? Maybe it was 27. Yeah, it was 27. I don't know. This is a different. No, it's not 27. We haven't read 27 yet. I think it was 26. Anyways, somewhere in there where it talks about how there will be righteousness for 3 generations, and the 4th generation, everything will pass away. And I can imagine Mormon reading all of these prophecies as he found these plates and saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly what happened. And so he says that's why he compiled or added these records. And then in verse 7, he says the same thing. Basically, he says, I'm putting them, or in verse 6, he says, I'm putting them at the remainder of my record, for they are choice unto me, and I know they will be choice unto my brethren. Then he says, and I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me, according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord, which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things, which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will. So he even says, look, I just feel like I'm supposed to include these. He points out some of the reasons that he thinks he's including them. But even more than that, he says that he feels like there's, he's just being prompted to. And so he does. And one of the things that I wrote down was that often we don't know the why. We don't know the why of being prompted to do something, and I've shared this story a million times, but I had an experience when I was bishop where I was prompted to do something. And for weeks and weeks, I kept struggling with it and going back to the Lord and saying, but I don't understand. Why would I do this? What's the purpose? And we have this, I have this example from Mormon where he basically says, I don't know why. I have no idea why I was supposed to do it, but I was supposed to. And so I did it. And I think sometimes we're prompted to do something, and faith is doing it anyways, even if we don't know why, and trusting God that there's a reason for it. And I know that's something I need to do better at, is just having that faith and saying, look, I feel like I'm prompted to do something and I don't know why, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I think that's super valuable for us to realize, that we can do that and we should do that. And then in verses 10 and 11, this is amazing to me. I think this is the spiritual, non-spiritual miracle of the Book of Mormon. I've listened to several books on the Book of Mormon this year through Deseret Bookshelf, and I know it's been mentioned at least a couple times. But you have in 10 and 11, Mormon says, after Amaleki had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin, he took them and put them with the other plates, which contained the records which had been handed down by the kings from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin. And they were handed down from King Benjamin from generation to generation until they have fallen into my hands. And this is like this, like I said, the spiritual, non-spiritual miracle of the Book of Mormon. I mean, this is 1,000 years. And I started thinking about everything that happens in those 1,000 years. You have Nephi being fleeing from his brothers so that he doesn't get killed. You have wars, and you have, we talked about it in a previous episode. You have in the Book of Omni, you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that write on these plates. Some of them write one word. I mean, what was it? Chemish? Is it Chemish that writes a single verse? Let me see here. It's one of my favorite verses in the Book of Mormon. Chemish, who gets the plates from his brother Amaron. And all Chemish says in verse 9 of Omni is, I, Chemish, write what few things I write in the same book with my brother. For behold, I saw the last which he wrote, and he wrote it with his own hand, and he wrote it in the day that he delivered them up unto me. And after this manner we keep the records, for it is according to the commandments of our fathers, and I make an end. So you have Chemish, who basically says, my brother gave me the plates today. I saw him write what he wrote, and this is how we keep the records. And that's all I'm going to say. So, I mean, you have people like that, and yet the records were kept, and this was important to them to keep these records. And then I think through the rest of it, all the wars and the battles and the wicked kings and the usurpations and the treason and the everything that happens, the secret combinations, the dissensions. I'm thinking about the fact that, I mean, you have King Noah, the wicked King Noah, and how he, what all the terrible things he did, and how he kills Abinadi, and Alma barely gets out with his life, and flees and has to hide, and yet these records are still maintained. You have Moroni and King Pahoran. Pahoran is basically overthrown as the ruler of the Nephites, by the Amalekites. Amalickiah and his followers, and Amaron, and yet the records remain. And then you have, the time before Christ comes. You have the earthquakes and the tornadoes and the whirlwinds and the all of these horrible things that happen. The 3 days of darkness. You have, um, all of that happening. You have the time after Christ is born, before I think it's before his crucifixion, where they basically say, there was so much wickedness in the land that if you set something down and looked away, it would disappear, anything of value, and yet these records remained. You have, not even to speak of the records of the Jaredites. I mean, Coriantumr was the last person I just read about that, and how yet his records were maintained even through the entire destruction of his entire nation. You have, uh, you know, um, down to Mormon and Moroni and the complete destruction of their people, and Moroni being the very last Nephite, and yet these records remain. And what a miracle it is that through 1,000 years and everything that happens in the Book of Mormon, these records remained. It is an absolute miracle, and the only explanation is the fact that God wanted these preserved. And every single prophet prayed that they would be preserved, that they would be brought forth to the house of Israel and to the descendants of the Lamanites and the Nephites in our day, and that it would prove the truth of the Bible and everything else that the Book of Mormon does. It is a miracle. It is a logistical miracle. It is a miracle that they were kept and that they were not lost. It is unbelievable. What a miracle that Mormon had these records at the end of the Book of Mormon, that he could have all of these records and they wouldn't be lost. What a miracle that is. It's a logistical miracle. 1,000 years. I mean, I think about that. And the United States of America, it seems like it's so old, but it's not even 300 years old yet. And this is 1,000 years and everything that happens. And these records were preserved. How unbelievable. How amazing is that? It is only because of the hand of God that could happen. And that absolutely blows my mind. The final thing that I want to share with you that I learned as I was studying, or thought of as studying Words of Mormon, is I think we get to the Book of Mosiah, chapters 1 through 5, and we read this amazing discourse from King Benjamin. Which, by the way, my children and my wife and I, last night we just watched the new Book of Mormon video. I guess it's not new; there's a couple more after it now, but about King Benjamin, and it's amazing. It's really, really good. I really like it. I it was 18 minutes, and my kids are like, "Oh my gosh, it's 18 minutes," and we finished it. And my daughter said, "Wait, that was 18 minutes already?" Which is pretty impressive when all it is really him giving a talk. Like, the entire video is basically him giving this talk that he gives in Mosiah 2 through 5. And we hear this amazing address, and we hear about the people covenanting with the Lord, and covenanting to be the people of Christ, to be the children of Christ. And yet, at the end of Words of Mormon, verses 12 through 18, as you read that, you get the idea that King Benjamin's reign wasn't easy. It was not easy. I mean, if you think about the fact, when we get at the end of Omni, we learn that King Benjamin's father, Mosiah, was the one that had to flee out of the land of Nephi, to escape the Lamanites. So they're starting over. They're starting new in a new land. They're, obviously the people of Zarahemla were already there, so it's not like they had to rebuild everything. But they really are starting new as far as Mosiah's people, and then his son Benjamin. It says it lists all the things that he has to fight, that he has to go through his reign. Um, And the first thing it says in verse 12, now concerning this King Benjamin, he had somewhat of contentions among his own people. And then in verses 13 and 14, it says that they had wars and battles with the Lamanites. In verse 15, it says that there was false Christs and false priests and false teachers. In verse 16, it says that there were people leaving and dissenting and joining the Lamanites. In verse 17, it says that the people had a lack of righteousness and that there was pride, there was stiff-neckedness. So, and then I think the most important thing is in verse 18, it says, wherefore, with the help of these, meaning, the holy men and the prophets that were in the land, King Benjamin, by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and also the prophets did once more establish peace in the land. It took everything in him to maintain peace, to bring peace back to people. It took everything in him to hold his kingdom together. It took everything in him to get to the point where when he gives this discourse at the end of his life, the people are willing to covenant to become the children of Christ. It wasn't easy. And I think I've always missed that. I've missed the fact that it was hard for King Benjamin. He had to work hard to get to that point. He had to fight physically. He had to deal with dissensions. He had to deal with false priests. He had to deal with false Christs. He had to deal with people being prideful and to deal with all these things throughout his life. And yet he did it. And he was able to maintain that power, or not that power, maintain and bring back the righteousness of the people and to bring peace to his land. And how hard that was. And I think sometimes we think it was just easy and it just happened and King Benjamin was fantastic. But looking at our day today and the struggles and the trials that we're facing, whether it's from COVID-19, whether it's from unrighteousness, whether it's from a society that seems to be at odds with the gospel at every single turn, whether it's the influences of Satan, whether it's the influences that our kids have to deal with, all of these things, we have to remember that the people in the Book of Mormon had to struggle with the same thing, and sometimes even worse. And they understand our day. And so the things that they teach are focused on us and they can help us. And I think that's so awesome. And it was, I love and it's one of the most valuable things to me as I'm studying is remembering how much that these were regular people. And King Benjamin was a regular person and he had his own struggles and he had the things that he had to fight with, both probably internally, but certainly externally as he was leading. It wasn't like it was easy to be the leader during the times that he was leader. It was hard and he had to deal with probably everything that we deal with today. Certainly not the internet and those types of things, but he had to deal with those influences just like we do. And it gives me comfort knowing that they had to struggle just like we have to struggle. And they maintained their faithfulness and they became the righteous people we see at the beginning of Mosiah that we'll be studying about in a couple weeks after conference and Easter. They became that through, in spite of, and probably in a lot of ways because of the challenges that they faced. And I really value that, and I think that's important to realize. So you can get the links to everything we talked about today in the show notes at everydayconversion.com/BOM41. And I've recorded this whole thing. I don't know if I'm going to put the whole thing on Instagram in my stories or on Instagram TV. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. But this is kind of fun. We'll see. Let me know if you like this. If you're watching this on Instagram TV or you're watching part of this in my story, I'll probably take a part of it and put it in my story. Let me know if you like that. Because I would love to continue to share those in that way, because it's super easy for me to just hit record on my phone at the same time that I'm recording. So if that's valuable to you, let me know. Really, the goal for me is to get this information to you and share what I'm learning. So hopefully it helps you as you're studying as well. So thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next episode. Remember, everydayconversion.com/BOM41. And in the coming week, we'll probably be talking a little bit more about preparing for conferences. Conference is coming up, and it's going to be a conference unlike any other, which is what President Nelson said last year. And it's certainly the case now that it's going to be recorded music. Nobody's going to be in the conference center. It's going to come from a chapel somewhere on Temple Square, and only the people that are speaking will be there at that time because of the things going on in the world. So it's certainly going to be like none other. But I have no doubt that it's going to be like none other spiritually as well, as we hear from our prophets and our prophet and our apostles and the other leaders of the church. And I'm super excited for it. So we'll be talking about that more this week. But you can get everything we talked about today at everydayconversion.com BOM41. And we will see you, yes, I mean you, in the next episode.
All right, that's it for today. Now, I know you want to hang out with me longer, but we both have a ton of things to do today, including living the gospel and trying to be like Jesus. Cue primary children singing.
I'm trying to be like Jesus.
But hey, if you want to get the links to everything we talked about today, you can find it on the episodes page of everydayconversion.com. You can also do cool stuff like subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening platform, sign up for email notifications of new episodes, and connect with us on social media there. It's kind of like a virtual church library without the militant librarians or a piece of paper to sign out your 3 tiny pieces of chalk for your lesson. Also, just remember, I do my best to make sure my opinions are in line with official church doctrine, but they are just that. They're my opinions. For official doctrine and viewpoints, I recommend you go to churchofjesuschrist.org or comeuntochrist.org.